Hello friends, welcome to the HFY Ode, where we bring you new science fiction stories, a new world, a new adventure. And yes, there is no robotic or AI voices here, only real human voices with real human touch. So let's start this journey, and please subscribe my channel if you like the stories and press the bell icon for the latest updates. Let's have a story. Okay.
Administrator Vale felt the cold reach the third layer of her skin, and she knew the colony was dying faster than her reports admitted. She stood at the central window of the hollow span, watching the dead star turn slowly below. It gave no heat. It had not given heat in 10,000 years. It was a cinder the size of a moon, and her people had come here to hide behind it because nothing alive ever looked at a dead star. And the things that hunted desperate worlds were always looking. The hollow span was not a ship. It was a broken piece of something much older, a curved fragment of a ring world that some lost civilization had built and abandoned long before the Thren learned to leave their own soil. Her people had found it adrift, hollowed out its interior, and lit the great mineral furnaces that ran along its spine. For 60 years it had been a refuge. Now it was becoming a tomb. Vale's body was gray stone laced with veins of pale blue. When she was warm and strong, those veins glowed faintly, the way all healthy Thren glowed. She looked down at her own hands. The light in them was almost gone. Administrator, the voice came from Cohen, her furnace keeper, a younger Thren whose skin still held some color. He moved slowly across the chamber, the way they all moved now, conserving the small heat they had left. When he spoke, the sound came from deep in his chest, as a low, resonant tone, the way the Thren had always spoken, stone humming against stone. Furnace 4 has failed. Vale did not answer at once. The Thren did not waste sound. That leaves 3, she finally said. That leaves 3, Cohen agreed, and Furnace 3 is cracking. The mineral feed lines are too cold to flow properly. We are burning the last reserves to keep the others lit. Vale turned from the window. The chamber behind her was full of her people, and the sight of them was the thing she could not put in any report because there were no words honest enough. There were 9,000 Thren on the hollow span, perhaps a third of them no longer moved. When a Thren grew too cold and too hungry, the body did the only thing it knew how to do. It slowed and it hardened and it set like cooling rock. A hardened Thren was not dead. That was the cruelty of it. They could be revived if warmth and minerals returned in time. But if the warmth never came, the hardening became permanent, and the mind inside the stone went out like a covered ember. In the far corners of the chamber, Vale could see them. Rows of her people standing perfectly still, gray and silent, their inner light gone dark. Children among them, whole brood lines set in place waiting for a heat that was running out. How long, Vale said. Cohen was a careful keeper. He did not soften numbers. If we burn everything we have left and lose no more furnaces, 90 days. If furnace 3 cracks fully, 60 after that, the span goes cold and everyone still soft will harden and no one will be warm enough to wake them again. The hollow span will set. All of it, forever. 90 days. Vale let the number settle into her, like cold settles into stone, slowly and all the way through. Send the beacon, she said. Cohen's tone dropped lower, which in a Thren was the sound of dread. Administrator, you know what answers a Thren beacon. She knew. Every Thren knew. When a Thren world cried out for help, one thing always answered, and it was never help. It was the Kisani lending concord. They were not an empire of soldiers. They had no great war fleet, no conquering armies. They were something the Thren understood to be worse. The Kisani arrived at dying worlds with full holds and gentle voices. They gave you heat. They gave you minerals. They gave you everything you were begging for, and they asked for only one thing in return, a contract. And the contract was always written so that the debt could never be paid, and a world that could not pay its debt to the conquered became property of the concord, and its people became labor that worked the rest of their lives to service a number that only ever grew. 3 Thren colonies had sent beacons in Vale's lifetime. The Kisani had answered all 3. None of those colonies belonged to the Thren anymore. I know what answers, Vale said. I also know what happens if nothing answers. I have watched my people turn to stone for 60 days. I will not watch for 90 more and do nothing because the only hand that might reach for us is a cruel one. Send the beacon, Cohen. Send it on every frequency. Tell whoever hears it that the hollow span is freezing, and that we have minerals to trade, and that we are not yet too cold to bargain. Cohen stood still for a long moment. Then his veins flickered, the Thren gesture of obedience given with sorrow. Sending, he said. The beacon went out from the hollow span. A slow, deep pulse, the recorded resonance of Vale's own voice carried into the dark behind a dead star. It said, "We are here, we are freezing, we have something to trade, Please, Vale turned back to the window and looked at the cinder of the star and the cold black around it. She did not expect mercy. Her people had learned long ago that the galaxy did not send mercy, it sent creditors. She only hoped that whatever came would come before the light in her hands went out completely. Part 2, the ants were from the dark. For 19 days, nothing answered. The span grew colder. Furnace 3 cracked along its lower seam on the 11th day, and Cohen and his keepers fought it with patches and prayer tones, and their own bodies pressed against the metal, and they kept it alive, but it now gave only half its heat. More Thren hardened, the still gray rows in the chamber corners grew longer. Vale walked among them each day, and spoke to them in low tones, even though she knew they could not hear, because a leader did not let her people sit in silence. On the 20th day, the censors woke. Cohen brought her the reading himself, moving faster than he had moved in a month, which frightened her before he even spoke. Ships, he said, many ships coming around the dead star's far side. They are large. Administrator, they are armed. Vale went to the long sensor gallery, where the span's old instruments looked out into the dark. She saw them on the display, and her veins went pale. It was a fleet, not a single creditor vessel, not the smooth, fat, gentle ships of the Kisani Concord. This was a war fleet, long-hulled vessels bristling with weapon mounts, armored across the prow, moving in a tight defensive formation that no trader ever used. There were dozens of them. Their hulls bore markings the span's database did not recognize, a blue circle, and within it a curve of white that might have been a wave or a wing. Conquerors, said old Sir. He had come into the gallery behind her. Sir was the oldest Thren on the span, so old that his skin had gone nearly white with age, and his inner light was a deep, slow ember. He had survived the loss of 2 colonies before this one. He trusted nothing that came from the dark. We sent a beacon saying we were weak and freezing and had minerals to trade, Sir said, his tone grinding low. We may as well have sent a map to a buried treasure and a note saying the guards are asleep. The Kasani buy worlds with contracts. These ones will take this one with guns. There's no difference except the speed of it. Vale did not answer him because she did not have an answer. She watched the fleet, and the fleet stopped. It did not approach. It did not surround the span. It held its position at a distance, far enough that its weapons, whatever they were, could not be aimed with any precision. The formation shifted, not into an attack pattern, but into something almost defensive. The big ships turning their armored prows outward, away from the span, as if they were watching the dark behind themselves more than they were watching the colony in front of them. That is not how you take a world, Cohen said quietly. It is not how you take a world quickly. Sir corrected. Patience is also a weapon. Then the message came. It arrived on the span's open channel in trade common, the rough shared tongue of the dark. The voice was strange to Vale, thin and tired, and carried in a register the Thren did not use, soft where a Thren would have been resonant. It was a voice that sounded like it had not slept. Hollow span, this is the lead vessel of the human fleet. We received your beacon. We are holding our distance and our weapons are cold. We will not approach without your permission. Vale waited for the demand. There was always a demand. Open your docks. Surrender your stores. Sign here. The voice continued. We are not here to take anything from you. I want to be honest with you because I do not have the strength left to lie. We heard your beacon say you have minerals to trade. We came because of that. We came to ask you a question. Vale leaned toward the channel. Beside her, old Sir had gone very still. Do you have anything to spare? The human voice said. Anything at all. We are not asking you to give it. We are asking if you would trade it. We have things we can offer. I know how this sounds coming from a fleet that looks like ours. I know what we look like to you, sitting out here covered in guns, but I'm asking you honestly, the way one freezing person asks another, do you have anything to spare? Because we don't. The channel went quiet. Vale stood in the cold gallery and felt something she had not felt in 60 days. It was not hope exactly. Hope was too warm a thing. It was the small, strange shock of being asked a question instead of given an order. A war fleet, old Sir said slowly, does not ask the freezing world if it has anything to spare. No, Vale said, it does not. She turned to Cohen, her veins faint as they were, flickered with decision. Open the channel, she said. Tell them one person may board unarmed. We will hear the question properly, face to face. If this is a trick dressed as honesty, we will know soon enough. And if it is not, she looked back at the fleet on the display, the great armed ships holding their distance, prows turned outward to watch a dark that frightened them too. Then I want to know what frightens a fleet like that. Part 3, First Contact. The human who came aboard was smaller than Vale expected and thinner than anything that captained a warship should be. She came through the span's cold airlock alone, in a worn pressure suit patched at one elbow. And when she removed her helmet, Vale saw a face that was all sharp angles, skin pale and drawn tight. eyes shadowed and deep. Her hair was cut short and had gone gray at the edges before its time. She looked, Vale thought, like a Thren who had been too cold for too long. She looked like she was hardening from the inside. Administrator Vale. The human said she had clearly been told the name. She placed one hand flat against her own chest, which the span's database said was a human gesture of sincerity. I'm Commander Maya Ellison. Thank you for letting me aboard. I know what it cost you to trust a ship that looks like mine. You speak trade common well, Vale said. Her own voice came as a low, careful tone, and a translator carried it across to the human as words. We've had 3 years to learn a lot of languages, Maya said. Most of them I learned hoping I'd never have to use them. Vale led her into the receiving chamber, slowly, because slowly was the only speed the span had left. Maya Ellison walked beside her and did not hurry her, and Vale noticed that. The Kasani always hurried you. Hurry was how they kept you from reading the contract. In the chamber, Old Sir waited, white and ancient and unmoving. Cohen stood by the cracked furnace where he always stood now, as if his body alone could hold its heat in. And along the cold walls stood the silent gray rows, the hardened ones, set in place, dark inside. Maya Ellison stopped when she saw them. She did not say anything for a moment. She looked at the rows of standing silent stone figures, and Vale watched the human's face change, and she understood that Maya knew what she was looking at. Somehow she knew how many. Maya asked quietly. Nearly 3,000, Vale said. They are not dead. If we had heat and minerals, many could still be woken. If we do not, the rest will join them, and then no one will be warm enough to wake anyone, and the span will set. Maya Ellison nodded slowly. When she spoke again, her voice was lower. Then I won't waste your heat with a long speech. Here's the question, Administrator, and here's everything behind it, honestly. She sat, without being offered a place, on the cold floor, which surprised Vale, because every other species that had ever come to a Thren world had wanted to stand above them. Maya sat at their level in the cold and spoke up to them. My people built that fleet over 3 years, she said. Every ship you see, we built it for a war. We were certain a war was coming, and we armed for it the way you arm when you think your survival depends on it. Every gun out there works, every hull is real. We are not bluffing you. We did not doubt it. Old Sir said, his tone like 2 stones grinding. You should have, Maya said, because here's the part we don't tell anyone. The war never came. The thing we armed against didn't attack our fleets or our worlds or our soldiers. She paused, and Vale saw the human's jaw tight. It went for our food. A blight fast engineered, we still don't fully understand it. It moved through our agricultural systems in 2 seasons. We have the strongest fleet we have ever built, Administrator, and we are starving behind it. We have warships with full magazines and empty holds. We came out here looking for systems that could feed us, and your beacon said you had minerals to trade, and minerals are not food, but a colony with minerals to trade is a colony that still has something. And right now we will talk to anyone who still has something. The chamber was silent except for the cracked furnace's low-strained hum. Vale looked at the thin human sitting on her cold floor, and she understood, for the first time in 60 days, that she was not the only one in the room who was dying. You said you have things to offer, Vale said carefully. A starving fleet does not usually. We have engineers who can fix what is broken. Maya said, we have power systems better than anything that built this place. We have defense if anything comes for you that you cannot fight. And we have one more thing. She reached into a pouch at her side slowly. So the Thren could see there was no weapon in it. She brought out a small wrapped bundle and unwrapped it on the cold floor. Inside was something pale and soft and steaming faintly in the chamber's chill. This is bread, Maya said. It is food. My people make it from grain and heat and time. We don't have much. This is from my own ration. I'm offering it to you, not because it's worth anything to a species that eats stone. I know it isn't, but because where I come from, you don't arrive at someone's door asking to trade and bring nothing. You bring what you have, even when what you have is almost nothing. Especially then. Vale looked at the small steaming thing on the floor of her freezing colony. It was the most useless gift anyone had ever brought to the Thren. The Thren ate silicate. They drew warmth and life from minerals and heat. Bread was nothing to them. It was air and dust, and yet Cohen had come closer from the furnace drawn despite himself. Even Old Sir's ancient white head had turned toward the small soft thing, his deep ember light shifting with something that was not suspicion. The Thren gathered slowly around the bread, this warm, impossible offering, and none of them could eat it, and none of them could look away from it. What is it called again? Cohen asked, his tone gone strangely soft. Bread, Maya said. It is warm, Cohen said, as if this were a miracle, which on the hollow span it was. Vale looked at Maya Ellison sitting on the cold floor of the tomb. Her colony was becoming a starving captain of a war fleet who had brought across the dark the one thing her hungry crew could least afford to give and the one thing the Thren could least use. You came to ask if we have anything to spare, Vale said. Yes, and in return you have offered us bread we cannot eat. Yes, Maya said. It was the most honest thing I had. Vale's faint blue veins flickered slowly, and the gesture this time was not sorrow and not obedience. It was something the Thren rarely showed to outsiders. It was the beginning of trust. Then let us talk, Commander Ellison, Vale said, the way one freezing person talks to another. Tell me what your engineers can do. Part 4, the transformation. What the human engineers could do, it turned out, was hold back a tide. They came aboard the next day, a small team, thin like their commander, in patched suits, carrying tools and not weapons. They did not march into the span and take it over. They asked Cohen, the furnace keeper, to walk them along the spine, and they listened to him as if a Thren furnace keeper were the most important person they had ever met, which in the matter of furnaces he was. Their lead engineer was a quiet woman named Rezi Okonkwo, broad-shouldered, with steady hands and a habit of pressing her palm to a machine before she worked on it, as if listening to it. She stood at the cracked seam of Furnace 3 for a long time, saying nothing, while Cohen hummed low beside her with the helpless tone of a keeper who had done everything he knew. This shouldn't still be running. Reza finally said, I know, said Cohen. You kept it running anyway. I had no choice, no, Reza said. You kept it running because you're good at this. The seam should have failed 30 days ago. Whatever you did to it bought this colony a month of life it had no right to. She looked at the old Thren keeper, and there was respect in it, plain and unhidden. I can give you more than a month, but I'm gonna need raw silicate, refined in volume, and I'm gonna have to take it as payment, not as charity. I need you to understand that. We can't give you this. We're too far gone to give anyone anything. We can only trade you for it. We understand trade, Cohen said. We have always understood trade. It is gifts with hidden teeth we have learned to fear. There are no hidden teeth, Reze said. I'll read you every line of what we take and why. Out loud as many times as you want. They worked for 6 days. Vale watched the span change the way she had once watched it die slowly all the way through, but in the other direction. The humans rebuilt the cracked seam of Furnace 3 with a layered alloy that Reza said would outlast the ring world fragment itself. They brought across a compact power unit from one of the warships and tied it into the spine, and warmth, real warmth, the kind the span had not felt in 2 years, began to move back through the cold metal like blood returning to a hardened limb. And on the 4th day, in the warmth of the rebuilt chamber, a hardened Thren woke. It was a young one near the edge of the gray rose. Its dark inner light flickered, caught, and slowly came up to a faint blue glow. Its stone limbs cracked and softened. It made a low, confused tone, the sound of someone surfacing from a long, cold dream, and the Thren around it answered with tones Vale had not heard on the span in a year, the deep, resonant chord her people made together when something was, against all expectation, good. Maya Ellison was in the chamber when it happened. Vale watched the human's drawn face as the young Thren woke, and she saw the commander's tired eyes go bright and wet. And she did not understand why a starving stranger would weep at the waking of a child not her own, until she remembered that Maya Ellison had a fleet full of hungry families and had not been able to wake any of them from anything. That evening, Vale found Maya alone in the sensor gallery, looking out at her fleet. Your engineer says she can wake hundreds in time, Vale said. Perhaps more, she can, Maya said. She's the best we have. We have a lot of best behaves. We built the finest fleet anyone in this region of the dark has ever seen. She laughed, and it was not a happy sound. We are very, very good at building things to survive a war, Administrator. We turned out to be very bad at predicting where the war would actually come from. 3 years, Vale said. You armed for 3 years against an enemy that struck your fields instead of your fleets. 3 years, Maya agreed. We watched the dark and counted ships and ran every battle 1,000 times in simulation. We never once ran the simulation where nobody shoots at us and the wheat just stops growing. She was quiet a moment. Strength is easy to build. It turns out, we're proof of that. You can build all the strength you want and still wake up one morning and find out it doesn't feed anyone. Vale looked at the human, this commander of a mighty starving fleet, and understood that the secret of the humans was not their guns and not their hidden power. The secret was that they had built everything except the one thing they needed, and they knew it, and they had come into the dark anyway, with bread asking the freezing for help. Why tell me all of this, Vale asked. The Kessani never tell a dying world the truth. The truth is leverage. You have just handed me yours. Maya Ellison turned from the window Because the Kisani's strength is that you don't know how badly they need you until you've signed, she said. Ours is going to have to be that I told you before you signed anything. We don't have time to be clever. Administrator, I have a fleet behind me that gets hungrier every day I spend talking. The only thing I have that the Kisani don't is that I can look at you and say, we need you as much as you need us, and here's exactly how much, and now let's make a deal that we both walk away from still standing. She turned back to the dark. That's the whole strategy, she said. There isn't a second secret behind it. Honesty is the only weapon I brought that they don't have. Part 5, the Revelation. The Kisani came on the 31st day. Cohen brought the reading to the gallery, and this time his low tone carried the grinding sound of old remembered fear. Concord vessels, 3 of them, coming around the dead star on the trade vector. They are not warships. Administrator, they are coming to the hollow span. Vale felt the cold reach all the way through her again. Even in the warmth the humans had given back, they heard the beacon. Old Sir said he had not left the gallery in days. He stood like one of the hardened ones, ember deep and unmoving, watching the dark he had never trusted. I told you, we sent a map and a note saying the guards were asleep. The humans heard it, so did the Kisani. The humans came first. The Kisani simply travel more slowly because they are in no hurry. They are never in a hurry. They know the freezing cannot run. Vale went to find Maya Ellison and found the human already moving, already grim, already pulling charts onto the gallery display with hands that had gone very still. You've seen them, Maya said. Collectors, Vale said. They will offer us everything. Heat, minerals, the waking of the hardened, and a contract no Thren world has ever paid. We have watched 3 colonies sign it. None of them are Thren worlds anymore. Then they can't be allowed to make the offer, Maya said. Once a desperate world hears that offer, Administrator, half of it wants to sign no matter what anyone says, because the offer sounds exactly like salvation. I know I have a fleet that's heard 100 offers that sounded like salvation. She pulled a route line across the display and her face went harder. But it's worse than the collectors at your door. Look at this. She traced the route the human fleet would have to take onward out past the dead star toward a far faint cluster of systems she had marked in pale gold. That's where we're going after here. She said, past that point, there's a system that scans clean for the kind of biology my people can eat. It's the closest thing to a feeding world we've found in 2 years of look. It is the only reason this fleet is still moving forward instead of lying down. And the only fast route to it, the only one we have the fuel left to take, runs straight through that. Her finger stopped on a wide-marked region between the span and the gold cluster. What is that region? Vale asked. Kisani claimed space, Maya said. They own the lane. They own the relays, the refuel points, the passage rights. A war fleet could fight through it, maybe. But fighting costs fuel and time and people. And I have a fleet that is starving now. Not after a battle. If I have to fight my way through Kisani space to reach the food, half my family's set before we get there. She used the Thren word without thinking, and Vale understood that Maya Ellison had learned what set meant and what it cost, and that the word now lived in her too. Vale was very quiet. You did not only come here because we had minerals to spare, she said slowly. No. Maya said, I came because you had minerals to spare, and because the Kisani are between me and the only thing that can keep my people alive, and a colony the Kisani want is a colony the Kisani will come to, and I needed to be standing somewhere. The Kisani would have to come with something to bargain with before they got there. She did not look away when she said it. I told you there was no second secret behind the honesty. There isn't. This is the honesty. I need you, Administrator, in a way that is bigger than bread and bigger than minerals. And I'm telling you the size of it before you decide anything, because that's the only thing that makes me different from what's coming around that dead star. Vale was silent for a long moment. Then she said, come with me. She took Maya Ellison not to the gallery and not to the furnace, but down, into the deep chambers of the span, where the hardened ones stood thickest. Row upon row of gray, set Thren, dark inside, and there, in the deepest row, Vale stopped before a cluster of figures, 3 large ones and 4 small, set close together, the way a family stands. My brood line, Vale said. Her tone when it came was the lowest sound a Thren could make. My partner are young, they hardened 40 days ago before the humans came. Reza Okonkwo says that with enough warmth and time, they can be woken. Time, Commander, the one thing the Kisani take and the one thing your fleet does not have. She turned her dim, flickering face to the human. You showed me your fleet's empty holds. I'm showing you mine. We are the same, you and I. We are both standing in front of the people we love, hardened and bargaining with strangers for the heat to wake them. Maya Ellison looked at the small set figures in the deep cold, and she did not say she was sorry. And Vale was grateful for that because sorry was a word the Kessanai used. Instead, Maya said very quietly, "Then let's make sure neither of us has to watch them set the rest of the way." And Vale understood, standing in the deep cold among her hardened young with a starving human at her side, that this was not the story she had been taught the galaxy told. She had been taught the galaxy was strong things taking from weak things. But here was the strongest fleet in the dark, and it was on its knees beside her in front of her frozen children, and it was not taking anything. It was asking to bleed at the same time she did, so that they might both stop bleeding together. Part 6. The Bargain. Old Sir stood against the bargain with everything his ancient ember had left. He said it in the open council, in the warm chamber, before all the Thren who could still move, with the human delegation standing to one side. He turned his white, cracked face on Maya Ellison and let his tone grind out across the room like a slab dragged over stone. "You are slower, Kessani," Sir said. "That is all you are." The Kessani come with full holds and gentle voices in a contract that eats a world. You come with empty holds and a tired voice and warships, and you tell us a sad story first. The story does not change what you are. Both of you found a freezing world and came to it because it was freezing. I have watched 2 colonies trust the ones who came when they cried out. I have nothing left of either colony but the watching. I will not counsel this one to trust a third. The chamber was silent. Many of the Thren flickered in agreement. Sir was old, and old on the hollow span meant survived, and the survived were listened to. Maya Ellison did not argue with him. She walked to the center of the chamber, into the cold warm air, and she sat down on the floor again, below all of them, and she took out a single sheet, physical, not a display, ink on something pale, and she held it up. "Then I won't ask you to trust me, Elder," she said. "Trust is what the Kessani sell. I'm not going to sell you anything. I'm going to read you the entire contract, out loud, every line in this room in front of everyone, and you're going to stop me anywhere you want. And I will explain it until a furnace keeper and an old survivor and a child all understand it the same way. And it is going to be short. The Kessani's contracts are long because long is where the teeth hide. This one is short because there's nowhere for teeth to hide in it." And she read it. It was short. Vale listened to every line, and so did Sir, and so did Cohen, and so did every Thren in the chamber. The hollow span would provide the human fleet refined silicate and raw mineral mass by measured volume at a rate the span set and could sustain. In return, the human fleet would maintain and power the span's furnaces, would station defensive vessels at the span until the span's council, not the humans, judged the threat passed, and would carry Thren engineers and a Thren vessel with the fleet onward toward the gold cluster, so that the Thren had eyes and a voice and a way home and were never simply cargo. Neither party could end the agreement by force. Either party could end it by saying so out loud, in council with the other present. The debt was the trade itself, paid as it was made, owed by no one once the goods had passed. There was no growing number. There was no clause that turned a people into property. When Maya reached the place where, in a Kessani contract, the teeth would have been, she stopped and held the page out flat and said, "There's nothing here. Come and look. There's nothing here." That's the whole point. Cohen came and looked, then slowly, leaning on the warmth of his own rebuilt furnace, old Sir came and looked too. The ancient Thren ran his cracked white hand down the short page, line by line, the way he had surely run his hand down 2 other contracts and 2 other doomed councils long ago. "It is short," Sir said at last, and his grinding tone had changed. It was not trust. It was something more careful and more real than trust. It was recognition. "It is short, and it does not grow, and it can be ended with a word, and it makes us crew and not cargo." He lowered the page. "I have read the long ones. Human. I know what the long ones are for. I do not yet know what you are, but I know what this is not. And after 60 years, that may be the most I have left in me to give that night." The hollow span did a thing it had not done in 2 years. It held a warming in the central chamber around the rebuilt furnace that now burned steady and full. The Thren gathered with the humans, and the keepers brought out warmed mineral broth, the deep nourishing slurry the Thren took in times of strength, and shared it. And the humans brought out bread, more than 1 loaf this time, a small precious store of it from the fleet, baked warm in the ship's own galleys and carried across. The Thren could not eat the bread, and the humans could not drink the broth. Everyone knew this. They shared it anyway, passing each across the circle, holding the warm foreign thing in cold or thin hands just to feel that it was warm, because the sharing was the point and had always been the point. Cohen held a piece of bread for a long time and finally said with great seriousness, "It is still warm, How is it always warm? Your ships are starving and the bread is always warm. And Maya Ellison, who had not laughed in a long time, laughed a real one this time. We make sure of it, she said. When everything else is going wrong, you keep the bread warm. It's the last thing you let go of. It's how you know you haven't given up yet. And around the steady furnace in the deep, the first rose of the hardened began. Slowly in the returning warmth, to glow. Part 7, the long warmth, the Kessini arrived on the 34th day, exactly as they always arrive, slowly, gently, in no hurry, certain. Their 3 collector ships came around the dead star on the trade vector, broadcasting on the open channel before they were even in close range. The famous Kasani voice already flowing out warm and kind and patient. Hollow span, we heard your cry. We have come so far to answer it. We bring heat, we bring minerals, we bring the waking of your sleeping ones. We ask only that we talk, only that we sit together, only that you let us help. And then the Kessini sensors found what was waiting at the hollow span, and the warm voice stopped. It did not stop because of a battle. There was no battle. Vale, watching from the sensor gallery beside Maya Ellison and Old Sir, would tell it that way for the rest of her long life. Because the truth of it mattered. Nothing fired. No human ship moved to attack. The fleet simply held its formation around the span, armored pros out weapons cold but unmistakably present, dozens of warships arrayed in patient defense around a colony that 34 days ago had been a tomb sending a beacon into the dark. The Kasani collectors slowed. They held at the edge of range, where the warm voice had come from, and for a long while they did nothing at all, and the gallery was silent. And Old Sir's deep ember did not so much as flicker. Then a single message came across in a Kessini voice that had lost all its warmth and become only a voice. The hollow span is claimed. It was not a threat. It was the Kessini admitting something. Vale understood it the way only a Thren who had watched 3 colonies die could understand it. Claim did not mean owned. It meant no longer alone. It meant the one thing the Kasani had no contract for. They did not have a clause for a freezing world that, when they finally arrived to collect it, turned out to have a fleet in front of it, and a short agreement no one could fight their way out of, and a council that could not be hurried because it was no longer afraid. The Kasani collectors turned slowly, gently, in no hurry, because that was the only speed they had ever had. They came about on the trade vector and went back the way they had come, around the dead star, into the dark. Looking, Vale did not doubt for some other beacon, some other freezing world that was still alone. She did not feel triumph as she watched them go. She felt something steadier and colder and better than triumph. She felt the simple, enormous fact of not being alone. The fleet and the span left together 11 days later. By then, the rebuilt furnaces had woken nearly 900 of the hardened, and Reza Okonkwo's engineers had taught the Thren keepers how to wake more on the long road. Slowly, in the moving warmth, Vale's broodline was not yet awake. But they were glowing now, faint and blue deep in the warm chambers, set still, but no longer setting. Returning, Reza had looked at them and said in her quiet way, time, just time now. And time was the one thing the bargain had bought back. A Thren vessel flew with the fleet, old, slow, full of keepers and engineers, and Vale herself, carrying eyes and a voice and a way home, crew and not cargo, exactly as the short page had said. Ahead lay the gold cluster and the food the humans needed, and the long road through a dark that no longer belonged only to creditors. Behind, the hollow span turned warm and lit beside its dead star, no longer a tomb, with enough of its people awake now to keep the others glowing until the rest came home. Vale stood on the bridge of the human flagship beside Maya Ellison as the combined fleet made ready to move. The commander still looked thin, her crews were still hungry. The road ahead was still long, and the food at the end of it was still only a clean scan and a hope. Maya Ellison was not a conqueror with a hidden secret. She was a tired captain of a starving fleet who had come into the dark with bread and no second strategy behind her honesty. And that Vale now understood had been enough, not because it was strong, but because it was true, and the 2 desperate halves of a thing told the truth can sometimes make one whole that survives. You armed for 3 years for a war, Vale said, and then you brought that fleet across the dark to beg a freezing world for help. Yes. Maya said, the Kasani are stronger than you in every way that has a number. Vale said, more ships of the kind that matter to them. More worlds, more holds and full ones. And they turned around at a single short page and a fleet that did not fire. Strength without need makes tyrants. Administrator Maya said quietly, watching the gold cluster come up faint on the long display. It did for the Kasani. It almost did for us. We were 3 years into believing our guns were the answer to everything before the wheat taught us otherwise. The strong who never have to ask for anything stop knowing how. And a thing that has forgotten how to ask has only one way left to get what it wants. She looked at Vale and her tired face was, for a moment, almost at peace. We forgot for 3 years. Your beacon reminded us, that's the trait I'll never put on the page, but it's the one that mattered. You didn't only get warm, you taught the strongest fleet in this dark how to say please again and mean it and live. The Thren Keeper signaled ready. Cohen's deep tone came across the channel from the old Thren vessel, steady and warm. Somewhere in the fleet's galleys, Vale knew the bread was being kept warm because everything else was still going wrong, and that was the last thing the humans would let go of. And now it was, in some strange shared way, the last thing the Thren would let go of too. All vessels ready, Maya Ellison said, "Take us out." Space turned, and the fleet and the Span's small ship leaped together into the long dark toward the faint gold light. Two starving things made briefly into one strong one, carrying the hardened home a little further with every day. Vale watched the cluster grow, slow and far. The food was not won yet, the road was not finished, her brood line was not yet awake. None of it was resolved, and she did not need it to be. She had spent 60 years learning that the galaxy did not hand you endings, but it had just once, against everything she had been taught, handed her this, a strong hand reaching out of the dark not to take, but to ask, and the asking she finally understood was the whole of it. The strong who could still ask were the only ones the dark had ever made worth following. In some number of days, they would reach the gold cluster and learn whether the hope at the end of it was real. In some number of days after that, they would know whether two desperate things, told the truth, could truly carry each other all the way. For now, Vale stood warm on a human bridge beside a captain who had brought her bread instead of a contract, watching her hardened children glow faintly toward waking in the moving heat and believing slowly and all the way through, the only way a Thren ever believed anything, that they would. The galaxy had taught her that strength took. The humans had crossed the dark, starving, to teach her that the strength worth having was the kind that knew how to need. Sometimes she thought the dark answers your beacon, and sometimes, against everything, what answers is just as cold as you are and reaches for your hand anyway.